What does Garten of Banban 3 hide off camera from the player? The third installment of Garten of Banban has us heading even deeper into this deranged institution, and I'm really beginning to question just how big this building is. In this video, we'll be taking a look behind the scenes of how this game is put together, and what kinds of things the developer hides out of view from the player. We'll also be breaking some things, like trying to escape the medical sector early, and messing with that final chase scene. As always, I hope you enjoy this bizarre look at some odd things that aren't meant to be seen. So let's very quickly summarize what happens in this chapter so we're all on the same page. Your character arrives and collects some batteries for their drone before being put on crayon collection duty. After sorting the art supplies, we head on over to the arboreal/aquatic sector. We then encounter Stinger Flynn, and we take a psychedelic ride with him into his mind. We then swap to play as a weird, small Stinger Flynn before resuming control of our normal character. We solve some more puzzles in the area with Toadster's jail before heading over to the medical sector to do a questionable experiment. We then jump back into Stinger Flynn's mind to hitch a ride in his sweet car before everything comes crashing down. We then solve some odd puzzles, try to avoid death in Jumbo Josh's deadly lounge, and then enter the progressive sector to do some bird math. We end up getting ambushed by Tamataki and Chamataki in a boss fight, before ultimately coming face to face with Stinger Flynn and a crazy Banban. We bird up and run away as Jumbo Josh knocks out Stinger Flynn and Banban in a brawl as the chapter comes to a close. Okie dokie, now that we have that covered, let's talk about that title screen. So in the third installment, I was able to get the title screen to work, so we can zoom out and see this massive room that is mostly empty, except for the area that the camera focuses on normally. And as we continue to move the camera backwards, we eventually can go out of bounds, and you can see just how big this room is from far away. Now, there's nothing else hidden out of bounds of this map, so let's move on. Immediately after starting, if we head out of bounds, we can see there's a lot of extra shapes and pieces of geometry floating around the starting area. We can also see that behind the walls in the cafeteria-like area with all the tables, there are the scanners that normally scan the room for crayons. Back here, there's also an orange sphere, the purple keycard we eventually collect, and a spare crayon out here too. After collecting the crayons, we can see that when we put them in the bin, they just sort of float down and vanish, one after another. However, there are some interesting things here. For one, Nab Nab appears in the corner of the room once we grab the purple keycard, and if we swap camera angles, we can see Nab Nab climb up. Nab Nab also slowly retracts into the darkness down below as the player draws near, before they ultimately vanish. There's also a green door in this area too that we can delete, and it allows us to go back into a room that we normally cannot access. There are two lights back here, and an invisible barrier, but nothing else. Getting on the lift, with everything brightened up, really makes this map look a lot different. And you can see that every area is actually just floating far away. It's a bunch of colored rectangles scattered around the void. Way above where the purplish blue lift is in the ground sector, the area we start in, we can find two scrap pieces of siding from the elevators we normally take to end the chapters. Not sure why they're up here, but they are. As we make our way to the arboreal/aquatic sector, there is a sealed room that has a Nab Nab in it. You can never see inside this room though because it is dark, but here it is fully brightened up. Nab Nab is just kind of chilling in the back of the room on the ceiling. Now, past Stinger Flynn, we can find a hidden room that I believe can be unlocked that has a note in it on the table and an interesting DNA display on the whiteboard. Let's talk about Stinger Flynn now though. Even though his eye is closed until we hit the switch, it is always following the player. Moving inside his model, we can see how his eye slowly rotates around as the player passes by. When we get warped to the Mindscape beach, viewing things from under the water is very interesting. Zolphius, which is the name of this giant worm thing, can be seen extending far beneath the level quite a ways. If we zoom out, we can see that the sand beneath the water is a perfect square, despite the water seemingly going beyond it for what seems like forever. What's interesting is that if you remove the filter effect in this area, we can see that we're technically still holding the remote control. It's just invisible, but the water effect allows us to see its faint shadow on screen due to the rendering order in Unreal Engine. If you look closely, you'll see the antenna and box alongside an exclamation mark on a screen in the water. Coming out of this dream, we see the corrupted Banban looking over us. I wasn't able to get a good shot due to the loading screen, but if we slow the camera down, we can see that Banban just slides into place really fast. When the cutscene is over, he just simply vanishes. After Slow Celine pieces out, we find ourselves back as the player in Toadster's jail. Just beyond the wall, behind the quote-unquote jail, we can find a floating piece of playground equipment out of bounds. We can even go over here as a player and climb on top of it and move around. Looking at things from out here definitely looks a bit odd. There is a massive gray box out here that has quite a lot of interesting things in it too. Going inside, we'll see that there are 2 Stinger Flynns and a few other characters on these floating blue platforms. We have to jump between the platforms to make sure we don't fall, but we can also find the 2-headed boss over here as well. They can't hurt us, and they don't do anything except sit in their idle animation. Next to them, we can find an Opila chick and a full-sized Opila bird and Tarta bird. Touching these birds will unfortunately jump scare us. And speaking of jump scares, Nab Nab will jump scare us when we go into their room. But this is how they look after the player is defeated. They actually clip through the ground, and we can find them stuck underneath it, frozen in place. Onward to the medical sector, this area has a lot of boarded up doors that don't actually lead anywhere. Some have blank hallways behind them, while others don't. We can find Nabalina's model stored out of bounds too, for when it is eventually leveraged for the medical sector minigame. And speaking of that experiment, I want to see what would happen if we ran away from Nabalina after failing it. If we remove the doors and go down to the end of the hallway, we can move the camera and watch Nabalina get up while we are far away. She sits there for a moment and then fires off like a rocket at us. She then gets frozen in her dive animation, and we can find her remote sticking out of her mouth. If we rewind time and then complete the minigame, we can see what happens once we pick up the audio disc. Nabalina warps from the bed to the doorway the second we pick it up, and as we approach the doorway, we can see that Nabalina slides away off camera and then eventually unloads soon after. Heading backwards, we can now take the audio disc and put it into the machine. And doing so causes both Nab Nab and Nabalina to come out. We can see that around the corner, Nabalina just sort of appears out of the ceiling. And then Nab Nab meets up with her. So what happens next is something we can't see at all. But by the audio, we're supposed to assume that Jumbo Josh kidnaps Nab Nab. However, off camera, Nab Nab just vanishes. As we leave this area, Stinger Flynn ambushes us, and we can just see him rise up from the void. If we check the out-of-bounds area, we will see that one of the 2 stingers are missing now too. Now as we enter the car scene, the first thing you'll notice is that the wheels on the car itself aren't even moving. The car is just sliding around the desert and the whole map is barren. Now eventually this car does hit a giant cactus, but we can see that the cactus is stored under the map until it is needed. Watching the car slide around is really funny from this perspective, and when we do eventually hit the cactus, the car is teleported to the center of the map and is repeatedly launched into the air several times. Each time the car spins, and then morphs back to the bottom of the map. Soon after this crash, we're back playing as the miniature Stinger Flynn, and we come across a doorway with Tamataki and Chamataki's tail sitting in the center of it. Normally this tail vanishes around the bend, but if we move the camera, we can actually see the characters clipping through the wall. Their tail is stretched from way over here to the doorway. If we warp back here, we can see that our character is just a floating pair of arms, and that we cannot interact with the tail. However, if we trigger the tail animation, we can watch it from this perspective to see how it's pulled off. Surprisingly, the tail sort of folds into the character and then snaps back to their default pose. It's only the room's darkness that obscures the tail clipping through the wall. Now, there isn't much hidden in this next puzzle section, so we'll move on to Jumbo Josh's area. In this area, we can see Nab Nab pass down the table, but if we look at their hidden face, we can see that their eyes are all glitched out. Under the floor, we can find a floating cabinet as well, just under the normal cabinets in this room. Now, Jumbo Josh has 2 animations in this area. One where he's checking the room out, and the other where he jump scares the player and defeats them. From a different perspective, we can see Jumbo Josh warping under the floor and clipping through a set of flooring. He then rises up slowly and checks the window to see if the player is in their seat. You can't really see this, but this Jumbo Josh model is actually pulled from the final encounter in this chapter and is warped all the way over here for this. Jumbo Josh then retracts into the floor and waits there until he needs to check the room again. If we destroy the glass where Josh is at, we can then jump through ourselves. Josh can't hurt us down here, and we just fall right through him. He won't even look at us like he usually does. If we wait down here, he will eventually check on us up top and realize we aren't in the room. So then the jump scare triggers and he punches through the door. He then freezes in place like this until the scene resets for the player respawning. Now Josh isn't the only one hiding here, because just behind the walls of this area, we can find a floating blue sphere and a copy of Banbalina. If we remove the walls, it's a bit easier to see. This Banbalina is used for when we clear this room, and the game developers just unload the Banbalina in the chair and replace her with this one that can walk. Of course, Banbalina and I have a score to settle, so I decide to drop her off a cliff anyways. Moving on to near the end of the chapter, we come across a room full of bird math. In the room next to us, we will find 2 aggressive birds above us that we cannot reach. If we go up there though, we will find that neither bird can hurt us up here. We simply go right through them. However, falling down below will trigger Tarta bird to jump on us, which will kill us. The jump scare kind of looks funny though from different angles. Going back to the bird math room, we can punch out the glass and go inside the room we cannot access. But we can't use the voice recorder that is on the table, unfortunately. There's nothing beyond the back door in that room either, as it is a sheer drop-off into the great beyond. If we skip over the birds in the boss fight, we can get access to this back area early, where we eventually encounter Stinger Flynn again. We can see a Banban stored off to the side though, which is kinda neat. There are a few staircases around here that we can walk up that don't lead to anything really, other than more out-of-bounds birds. On top of the roof of this area is the demonic Banban, who is currently stuck running in place. He will eventually swap into the gameplay area as the plot progresses. In case you are curious, trying to hit the switch back here early doesn't do anything until the boss is beaten and you are on your birdmobile, so we can't start the chase scene early. Rewinding time and going back to the boss fight, we can see the boss load in beneath the stage and slowly climb his way up in a very awkward manner. It's actually a bit uncomfortable to watch, if I'm being honest. The boss also has this massive tongue attack that happens super quick. But if we slow down time, we can see how it actually happens. The head rears back as the tongue comes out and slowly starts to increase in size. And then the head snaps forward as the tongue gets absurdly large and strikes the main platform of the room. I'm not sure how the tongue does that, but it's basically magic. So it's hard to tell, but the fireworks are always stored at the top of the room. But even if we made our way up there, we aren't able to grab them until they roll down. The boss can't really hit us too well as we fly around though. Okay, maybe I lied. After the boss is defeated, we can see they just sort of quickly fall off the ledge and then they get stuck frozen at the bottom of the pit in their falling animation. It happens very quickly too. Also, the board that falls down at the end of the boss fight can be found out of bounds behind the room, in case you're curious. Heading back to the grand finale, we can jump on some birds and then summon Stinger Flynn. Once Stinger Flynn spawns in beneath the map, the Banban that was nearby moves and another demonic Banban appears. The normal Banban is floating beneath the map, waiting to get grabbed by Stinger Flynn, and as the cutscene plays out, you can see how the developers swap between the happy-looking Banban and then his demonic counterpart. They just use the player's limited view window to pull off the swap. But not before Demon Banban slides through Flynn's body oddly. Banban eventually falls down and freezes in place as the demonic version of him jumps up on the edge of the railing. And the final chase begins. As the player begins to run away, Stinger and the group unload, and the Banban who is running on the ceiling is warped downward to chase the player. And as the chase progresses, there is a final confrontation at the end. If we brighten up that room, we'll see that Jumbo Josh and Banban are stored way off in the back of it. Stinger Flynn eventually loads in, and the back of the room copy of the demonic Banban is warped up front and comes running in. At this point, they move Jumbo Josh out of bounds behind Stinger Flynn, and Josh waits back there until the cutscene progresses. Josh then flies across the map to attack Banban, and once Josh goes to smash Banban on the ground, Stinger Flynn then warps across the map to intervene. The fight then plays out, and eventually the 2 birds up top come tumbling down and freeze in place. It all looks a bit odd from a different view. The whole encounter then gets covered by darkness and unloads as the room empties. At this point, Banban and Jumbo Josh appear back in the corner of the room, and the chapter is relatively concluded. Something you can't see is that there are copies of Opila and Tarta bird above this room. They serve no real purpose that I can tell. It's also possible to jump down here during this final fight and see it up close and personal, which is pretty funny. But with that brings us to the end of our behind-the-scenes look at Garten of Banban 3. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop a like if you did, and I'll see you all in my next video real soon. Cheers!